Clearly had a productive break. So with that, my friend's recognized for any questions he might have for the panel.
But I'm at a loss for words now, and I'll yield back on the question.
I'm going to try that line again.
You should have used it on me. I got a haircut.
Chair now recognizes my good friend from New Mexico for any questions she may have for the panel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and welcome to Chair Westerman and Ranking Member Grijalva. And Chair Westerman, I know how much you care about our public lands and our beautiful natural resources. You have done great work in that area. I'm pleased to be able to co-sponsor legislation with you about our public lands. I guess what strikes me is that there are two different sort of themes going through today's hearing, and one is the idea that we need to protect our public lands. One of my concerns is wondering how a $436 million cut to NPS and a National Park Service and a $255 million cut to BLM in the Republicans' Interior Appropriations Bill would provide our communities better access to public lands. Are you supportive of those cuts?
Thank the gentlelady from New Mexico for the question. I'm supportive of getting our fiscal house in order after the extreme run-up of the debt and the deficit spending during the last Congress and under the Biden administration. And if you look at how much spending was increased, only in Washington do you call putting the spending levels back down to where they were a couple of years ago a massive cut. So yes, I'm in support of getting our fiscal house in order. And that's going to seem painful in some areas, and some people will make it look like it's more painful than it actually is. But we've got $33 trillion in debt, and I know the gentleman didn't ask questions, but his debt clock is still over there running at record speed.
So thank you very much, Chairman. And you know, that comes up again and again as we're looking at some of these Republican bills. And what I go to again and again in response is that Republicans seem to want to get our fiscal house in order under Democrat presidents without looking at the fact that the deficit was caused in most part by Republican tax cuts, starting with tax cuts that go back, and then we had the Bush tax cuts, and then we had the Trump's tax cuts. And we actually have a great chart that I pull out sometimes when I'm on the floor. I can't pull it out here. We don't have the use of charts, but I can tell you that is the answer, that if we care about that, we need to go and look at some of those tax cuts and make sure that we don't continue them into the future. That would bring our fiscal house in order. The other thing, go on.
Well, about those tax cuts, I've heard that said over and over and over, so I went back and did some research on that. And if you look at the CBO projections right after the tax cuts went in place, they were projecting a huge decrease in revenue. But if you actually go out and look at the revenue against what CBO projected, it was way above. I think it was about $700 billion above what CBO projected. I actually had a meeting with the CBO director, and he said, yeah, we missed that one. But that message has been repeated over and over and over, and I guess that if you say something long enough, people will believe it and the press will pick up on it. But if you actually look at the data, the tax cuts increased revenue to the federal government way above what CBO projected in their score when the Tax Cut and Jobs Act was being debated in Congress.
So I actually went and looked at that myself because I was curious, because that is sometimes a response. And what we looked at was there were actually CBO projections, and the CBO projections were, before the tax cuts, were for revenue growth that was much higher. After the tax cuts, even though there was increased revenue, they were about, and I don't have the number right in front of me now, but I think I'm going to pull it up. It is about, well, I'm going to send that to you because it was several $100 million lower after the tax cuts. So the tax cuts did bring down revenue than what was projected.
And last year we had $4.9 trillion in revenue, which was an all-time record, which exceeded the projections from CBO.
So, right, but they lowered the overall revenue that would have come in. And as an example, the Bush tax cuts in 2001 and 2003 increased the debt by $5.6 trillion. The Trump tax cuts increased the deficit by $2.3 trillion. The revenues were decreased by $1.9 trillion over 10 years. So we have this tension between how do we actually deal with protecting our natural resources, and do we do this on the backs of the beautiful land that we hold dear, or do we actually say the wealthy, the biggest corporations should pay their fair share? So that's the issue about the public lands and how do we invest in this wonderful treasure that we have. And then we move over to the issue that there are issues around migrants and immigration that we also haven't dealt with. And when I hear comprehensive immigration reform, I hear about $1.4 trillion in economic benefit to the United States. I also know that the supplemental that the president has presented has money to actually address the root causes. We need to go in and make sure that we stop and we intercept so we don't have as many migrants arriving at our borders. There is money in the supplemental. There is money that Democrats have talked about. How do we make sure we do that? How do we make sure that we also invest in the technology so that we're addressing fentanyl, which is coming in at the points of entry and not carried by asylums? That's another one of my favorite things to pull out, is the reports that say it's not asylum seekers that are bringing in fentanyl. It is actually a Cato Institute who has said it is at the ports of entry, it's United States citizens who are bringing in fentanyl. We need to address it. People in my community are dying. But there are key things that we can do around immigration to address these issues without sort of beating up on New York State because it asked to lease some land and creating the dog whistles that we've heard our ranking member speak to. And with that, I yield back.